Our life is filled up with problems, isn't it? So if we are, trying to solve a problem in our daily lives, we try to find out what are the most efficient tools and techniques or frameworks that we need to, adapt to in order to solve a problem. I personally try to refrain from using the term problem and, instead call it a challenge rather. The problems we solve could be huge, it could be small, it could be maybe for our own purposes or maybe for a particular business. No matter how large or small they could be, fundamental task of a manager is having access to all required data to be able to use the right set of tools and techniques to solve these challenges effectively and quickly. Welcome to this session on mastering the art of problem solving. In this particular video, we will be discussing about some of the most essential tools, techniques, and frameworks which is absolutely critical to have in your toolbox, especially if you are a data science professional, if you are managing teams, managing clients, managing projects, then problem solving is a particular task that definitely would be very critical in your day-to-day job. At a junior level, whether you are at a senior level, you have to master the art of problem solving. And it's not always necessary that you have to look into tools and techniques or frameworks that have a huge and steep learning curve. You could often employ very basic structures or very basic techniques which are not like rocket science. And you could come out of a problem or a challenge in a much more informed way. So let's see how to solve problem in a generic way. And I'm sure you would find many of these tools and techniques quite useful in solving a problem. Often, not asking the right questions at the stage of solving a problem or defining what the problem is might lead to overlooking a potential opportunity. For example, if you're trying to identify employees who don't stay for 9 hours in a typical corporate environment, you might be overlooking the underlying reasons why they are not staying in office for 9 hours. Is their work being finished off? Are they efficient and completing their tasks in 6 hours, or are they being underutilized? Often, especially in India, it's common bias that managers tend to have. Often managers feel the longer you stay, the better an employee you are. Isn't that so? So, the most important thing to solve a problem at hand is to define the real problem and not its symptoms. For example, a particular division in a consulting firm is not delivering expected results, and the board of directors have this feeling that the employees are not dedicated. Whereas, upon looking at the problem deeper, he or she finds out that the leadership hired by them is inefficient in resource utilization or effective planning of the projects. The most important thing is to define the underlying real problem and not its symptoms. Now, once you define a problem, the next objective you need to solve is to search for alternative solutions. Once you have an idea about what all alternative solutions you could have, you have to evaluate all of those alternatives to understand what are the costs and what are the benefits of employing a particular alternative versus another. And once you have fixed upon a particular alternative, you have to implement that. There are plenty of tools and frameworks that managers use to solve a particular problem. Now, some of them are like the Fivewise approach or the RCA, which is root cause analysis. Or often it starts with a very basic and simple step, which is by creating a checklist. Now, the most basic methods are known as heuristic methods, right? Often heuristic methods are like rules of thumb. Now, this term was first used by a Scottish preacher known as James Durham. where in one of his books known as Heaven Upon Earth, he has mentioned about how builders constructed buildings using rules of thumb and guesswork. Now we are talking about a time then, when there were no sophisticated measuring tapes or instruments, and workers would use their thumbs to figure out what is the thickness of the wall that they are trying to drill. So essentially, what we are talking about here is that heuristic methods are more like common sense, and often this is like an educated guess that you need to take without seeking help from someone who is either not available at the moment, or it might be costly to bring in an SME every time that there's a problem. So, this is one of the most basic methods of solving a problem when you are constrained by resources. Let's now look at an overview of the other different kinds of tools and frameworks that you could use in certain situations. The first one we can talk about here is what is known as the five whys approach. Now, five whys is a useful tool for you to identify what is the underlying or the root cause of a problem by repeating or repeatedly asking five questions. Now, five is a good rule of thumb out here. You could ask, six questions, you could ask 10 questions, but five seems to be a good number and a standard for you to, ask, for example, to solve a problem. And this is one of the most simple tools to go into the root of a challenge without any need for, rigorous of statistics or rigorous model building exercises involving predictive models, regression models. These are all not required at all. And the five whys is often represented visually by a diagram which is known as the fishbone, or also the cause and effect, or Ishikawa diagram. And this is widely used in many of the practices where a problem is being solved. This visual, how it helps is it helps us look at different potential or real causes of any underlying problem, and it kind of gives us it allows us to do a preliminary screening of what could be the root causes of a problem, then which can be further drilled down later on and can be pursued in greater depth. There are several free and open source as well as commercial tools available in the marketplace that find wide applicability in solving challenges and tasks, which are somewhat complex in nature. Now, this is one basic tool. Now, let's look at some of the more popular and most popular tools that you could utilize in order to solve the next business challenge that might come to you. One very important tool is the Strawman deck. You might have sometimes heard about the term used by top-notch managers, or business people often use this term that do you have a strawman deck ready, or do you have a bare bones sketch ready? So all that they mean is that this is an initial or a first draft representation of a particular solution that you're trying to develop for a problem or task that you have in hand. Now, why this is helpful is because definitely this is not a final version that you would be churning out in your final development stage. But an initial draft is always helpful in representing some of the most fundamental and important facts rather than waiting for everything to get finalized till the end. The affinity diagram, or also known as the KJ method, which came from the author of this particular term, the Japanese anthropologist Jiro Kawakita. So he had developed this particular diagram and this particular method. This is also known as thematic analysis. This is an extremely useful tool in problem solving. So what this talks about is often in solving a problem, a group of people tend to brainstorm around a particular idea in different directions in different creative ways. And basically, a lot of these ideas which come out could tend to be similar in some way or the other. It's a very important task as a manager, to understand what are those particular ideas which look similar, or which could be associated with one another. And then you could prepare a whiteboarding exercise, a diagram where you could, record each idea in a sticky note somewhere on the board, and look for ideas that are similar, and you could place them side by side. And then once you place all of these ideas side by side, you could then draw necessary relationships among them. You could form groups and subgroups in different ways to understand, okay, that these concepts go hand in hand. And this is a very crucial exercise to, rule out redundancies from a brainstorming session and focus on the most important core concept. So generally, the affinity diagram in this particular way that we discussed does not by itself add a lot of value, right? You have to, attach this or associate this, integrate this with other popularly used tools, like probably the fishbone diagram that we discussed, right? In order to make much more meaning out of it. Example, if you want to measure the customer satisfaction, you could have various metrics. You could think about what is the uh, delay in the process in serving a particular customer. You could also think about the pricing of a product. You could think about what is the quality, how much time does it take for a particular customer assistant to solve a particular customer problem. And a lot of those factors could affect customer satisfaction. Having all those factors on a whiteboard and trying to understand which factors are related directly or indirectly gives a good view and a good deeper view into the problem that you are trying to solve. Often, also in problem solving, another important tool is to understand about the failure modes. This is an analysis which is known as FMEA, or failure mode and effects analysis, where uh, the modes or the failure modes are indicating the means, the modes or the ways in which something might fail. Failures here are, you could think of failures here as any errors or defects. It could be in a software, it could be in a hardware, it could be in a manufacturing product that you are trying to build, it could be in a workflow, in a service based industry. In whichever form, you could define that according to your need. And these failure modes are the ones, especially that affect the customer, which could be a potential customer or a real and actual customer. This is a very interesting analytic tool used especially in statistical control, where any deviation from the desired outcomes is considered to be a defect or an error. And when we talk about effects analysis in the FMEA, so the second part of FMEA talks about the effect analysis. Now, what this refers to is, it refers to the studying of the consequences of the particular failures. This is often used in the study of Lean and Six Sigma methods in statistical quality control. And in this particular approach, failures are often prioritized according to what is the severity of the impact, what could be the frequency of the occurrence, and how easy is it to detect. So the core principle here is to minimize the amount of defects or the errors. The other important tool, also known as a swim lane diagram, is extremely useful when you are trying to visualize a complex process. And what happens is, in case you are doing a project for an enterprise you would be knowing would have multiple departments. A company has a finance department, an operations department, a marketing department, and each of these departments are headed by different officers: chief marketing officers, chief financial officer, chief technical officer. And often these departments work in silos, right? Now, the way it creates a problem is in terms of coordinating among these departments. To have a very clear picture about how these departments are interconnected is very important. If you have to understand how the process flows from each of these departments, how they are interlinked, and how does the final product or service that you are looking at uh, comes up. Right? This is more like a simple flowchart kind of a structure which splits different responsibilities of each of the different departments, and what are the particular actions that each of these departments would take. So, for example, here in terms of the customer, you could see that the customer is placing an order, and then the sales department is receiving the order, right? And then it's checking the stock. If it's in stock, then it's going to the checkout page. If the card is valid or not valid, and if there's a cancellation of the order, it goes to another end. And if the card is processed, then it goes to the delivery section, and then the entire transaction gets finished. So this goes through different departments. So often in other architectures, if you are looking at a big data architecture, there's this concept of master and slave, right? Even if you are thinking of the roles and responsibilities of a master and a slave, they would be different. Even a lot of task managers have different roles assigned to each of them depending on what is the kind of architecture. So in understanding those architectures, this kind of flowchart and schematic diagrams are really useful in understanding the interactions and the relations. um, Now, in this particular page, what we see here is two important terms, and one is what is called Badir, which is Aring's proprietary data to decisions framework, which has been adopted by many of the Fortune 500 companies for their data literacy and digital transformation initiatives. Right now, this is an in-house tool that Aring's. This is a proprietary tool that they have, and also, on the other hand, we have the concept of DMIC, which is a popular concept in the field of Six Sigma. And what this talks about is that you define your problem, you measure it, you analyze it, you then try to improve it, and once you improve it, you are now trying to control for it. So, what Badir as an approach or as a framework, as a commercial tool, helps you with is that it creates a step by step process and helps you identify and solve your problem. Or first step here is to ask the right business question. And by right business question, what we are trying to say here is that a question that you are trying to find in a way which could be measurable and not something in the air. The second part of this framework is what is called the analysis plan. And the whole objective here is to formulate a hypothesis driven plan where you list out certain assumptions, certain hypotheses, and plan out the exact phases of the execution. The third important part is where you collect relevant data based on this particular analytical plan and decide on what are the data sources or the factors which you would need to be able to solve the challenge. Important step is once you have all the relevant data, you would try to mine that data and try to figure out how much of knowledge you can extract, what patterns you could extract from that data, and come up with insights either through statistical methods, using more rigorous machine learning methods, or things like that. And after you have got these insights, you would then show the customer or your client an action plan, which is based on key performance indicators that the client is interested in. You could suggest your client or a customer in giving him or her this kind of recommendation. So you could actually look up to the particular site of adding.com, adding Budget Advantage. You could also read up about more on DMIC, and these are really popular techniques and frameworks that are very useful and handy in solving business problems. And there are also, different other methodologies which are out there to solve a complex business challenge that, you know, have in your hand. Now, if you're interested to know more about uh, such particular concepts, you could also watch out our video on VSM or value stream mapping, which is one of the most crucial tools that is used in decision making and consulting. And in case you are interested in solving, advanced problems, you could also look at the simplex model. You could look at appreciative inquiry, or you could look at something called SSM. Simplex method is a 8-stage method where you start off with finding a problem, then trying to find out the facts, define the problem, find the idea of solving this particular problem or challenge. Then you do certain selection and evaluation steps, then do a rigorous planning of what exactly to do, and then finally you sell this idea and act upon it. Similarly, in appreciative inquiry, this tries to help solve challenges or problems by examining what is or are working well, what's not working well, right? So appreciative inquiry doesn't look at what's not working well, rather focuses on what's working well around the problem. And this kind of gives more in-depth inquiry into the exact challenge that you are trying to. Similarly, SSM is also a four-step or a four-stage procedure that helps to find out the root cause of a challenge. And then it goes on to define actions that could improve the. One a very good site that you could check out is that of mindtools.com, which is a very good source where you could find out many such methods, many such tools, and they have covered it with basic examples. And these are really useful and handy tools that you could check out for your day-to-day problem solving activities. That's all that we have to discuss for today, and hope you have learned something new. If you're looking for any private mentorship, career counseling, or even if you're thinking about practicing mock interviews to be well prepared to ace the data science interviews that you will be taking up soon, or even if you're even looking for guidance and training on data science, especially if you're a beginner, we would encourage you to fill up the form that is provided in the description section of the video below, and one of our support team members would get in touch with you. Most importantly, don't forget to click on the bell icon and press the subscribe button to stay updated about our any such new interesting and informational videos that you definitely do not want to miss out. Stay tuned, wait for our next video, and we will catch up soon. Thank you for watching.